Hello, everyone. My name is Wes. I am the host of the Product Led Summit. Here we have Olof, who is incredible at product virality. So I am so excited to have him here. Now, for those of you that don't know, Olof, would you mind just sharing a little bit more about you and Mixmax and what you're all about?
Totally. Thanks for the invite. Excited to be here. So, as mentioned, my name is Olof Mate. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Mixmax. And at Mixmax, we're reinventing business communication. So, in particular, we help folks in sales success or recruiting, sales succeed, and hire better. And one of the ways we do that is we kind of sit on top of your email or your CRM and just integrate with your existing workflow so you don't have to learn an entirely new app. And as it turns out, that's a really important part of Virality. So happy to dive in.
Awesome. Let's take it away.
Nice. So yeah, really excited to share with you all. I thought I'd kind of call this talk overall virality in SaaS, what works and what doesn't. And so the goal for this, anyone who's listening, whether now live or later on, the goal for you all is to be able to get to $0 CAC. Because if you have a viral app, you won't be spending anything or close to nothing on customer acquisition costs. So I hope you'll get some really good and fun ideas that you can start to implement in your products or in your companies. And with that, we'll go through kind of three topics here. We'll start what you'll learn about. We'll establish a taxonomy for different types of virality. So I'll go through the 5 different types of virality that exist. And you'll see that some of them might be really applicable to you. Some of them might be harder for you to implement. Then we'll talk about what works and what doesn't. And here I'll really just go through the 5 types and say, we tried all of these at Mixmax. Here's what worked for us. Here's what didn't work. And when it didn't work, here's why we think it didn't work. And hopefully that can inspire your thinking in your companies. And last, I'll close on a note just to emphasize that, as you of course know, as growth, product, marketing people, not all acquisition channels are created equal. And that goes for your different viral acquisition channels as well. So those will be our takeaways on the journey to $0 CAC. Stay with us as we dive in here. Sweet. I spoke a little bit about Mixmax already, so I won't dive into this. This is just some screenshots in case we didn't have time to cover that. Sweet. So first, a piece of bad news, and that is really the only way you can get to $0 CAC is if you create a viral product. Now, of course, in Mixmax, we are a little bit lucky insofar as we're a communications app, and so it's kind of naturally easier for us to have some virality. Now, the good news is that there are several different kinds of virality. And so even if you're not a communications app, and even if some types of virality might be out of bounds for you, there are other ones you can use. And so this is where the 5 different kinds of virality come in that I'll go in and talk about. So the first type is called network effects or network virality. Second, value virality. The third, exposure virality. These top 3 ones are very, very product specific. And so what that means is, depending on the type of product you have, you may or may not be able to use them. Number 4 and 5 in this list are much more generically applicable, and you probably know what they are already. Number 4 here being referrals and invites. And then number 5 being what we call word of mouth, which is essentially brand or being a really hot app in the moment. So I'll go through and explain what all of these mean and how what they are with a couple of examples that we see in SaaS products today. So first one, network virality. So this type of virality is probably the best known type and the one that we know deepest. Obviously, Twitter is a great example of this. When we talk about network, we often talk about network effects. And the meaning here is that the product itself just doesn't make sense unless a ton of people are using it, unless there's a whole network. Twitter would be really boring if you were the only one on it. And so the definition of this is really that here, you're getting your users do work to get other users using your product because it makes your product better for them. Another great example of network virality would be LinkedIn. So we could switch the slide here. It looks like it jammed a little bit. Oops. There we go. LinkedIn, another wonderful example. LinkedIn, if you were the only one using it, would be completely useless. When the entire world is on it, it's the de facto workplace identity. And note here with LinkedIn, what's interesting about it from a network effect perspective is, right, you're very likely, A, to get other people on LinkedIn, because you need it for it to be useful for you. And also the types of people you want on this product are people outside of your own company. Because only when you have people outside of your own company does LinkedIn get really useful. And with regards to that, it's helpful to distinguish here between two different types of network effects: cross-company and intra-company network effects. So cross-company network effects we saw with like LinkedIn or Twitter, right? And it's the notion that LinkedIn or Twitter, they're kind of useless if you just have people in your own company using those apps. When people outside of it use it, it's great. So definitely the strongest type of network effects. Now, what's interesting is that you can also have network effects within a company. So what are some examples of that? A wonderful example is Slack or chat. There are no real benefits that accrue to you and your companies, or even me at Mixmax, if we use different chat apps in our different companies, as long as everyone within the company uses the same chat app. The same dynamic exists for for CRMs. It makes no sense if sales is using one CRM and success uses a different CRM. Within a company, everyone has to be on one CRM. Now, note, of course, across companies, it doesn't matter if Walgreens is using Pipedrive and Mixmax uses Salesforce. No real benefits accrue across. So you can think about kind of these apps that have intra-company network effects as having slightly lower intrinsic virality. Now, what's really cool is there's a hack to get around this kind of defect of just having intra-company network effects, and that is to create an app store. And so this is why companies like Salesforce and Slack create developer ecosystems on top of their platforms. So what's really cool, what happens here is if you build ERP, finance, or HR or collaboration apps on Salesforce, if you're a developer, you want the entire rest of the world on Salesforce because it helps you sell more of your own apps. So even if you're a product that just has intra-company virality, there's this other way to get stronger virality by building a developer ecosystem around your app. So that's kind of network effects in a nutshell, one of the best understood types of virality that we have. Awesome. Second one here, value virality. Value virality is, I would say, probably a much newer type of virality and probably one that's less blogged about and less understood. Here, the notion is that your customers, just by using your product, provide value to other people. They make their lives easier simply by using your own product. And so they don't necessarily want to spread your product. They don't necessarily even like your product, but they're just spreading it simply by using it. Here's an example. Any document signing product is a product that shows value virality. And so you might be like, hey, why is that? Right? So if you think about it here I've received a document to sign in EchoSign or Adobe Sign as it is. And let's just consider for a second what document signing looked like before e-signature companies, right? Before then, you had to download the file, download the attachment, find a printer that worked. Hopefully the paper wouldn't jam. You'd print it out, you'd sign it, you'd try to find a scanner, rescan it, attach it, upload. Nightmare process.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, people don't even remember what it was like before e-signature, right? E-signature comes along, and here, I'm not even a customer of Adobe Sign, but I'm getting a ton of value because I click in, tap the link, and it's just like done. It's so much easier than what it looked like before. So that's value virality. And Gretchen here, who you can see on the screenshot, sent me this. She might not even like this product, right? But she's spreading it, and she's spreading the awesomeness just by using it. Another example are chats. So Intercom's a pretty good example of value virality. Prior to chat heads on sites, finding support on the site or doing sales inquiries were typically forums on websites, or you had to dig into a footer to find a support email. Here, chat is just and support is immediately accessible. And so a site using Intercom or a chat head provides a ton of value to people who might not even be Intercom customers. And so they go, wow, that chat was really awesome and made my experience so much smoother. I should look into it. So it's a really powerful way of virality. Sweet. The third type of product-related virality here, exposure virality. This is one you've all seen a lot of. The notion here is that your customers show off your product, and they do that because it makes them look good. And so they're not providing value to you. You might not even care, but they love to show off. And so some examples of this are Airbnb has exposure virality. You go somewhere, you tell everyone about the amazing, you post pictures of the amazing penthouse. Everyone asks you, where did you get that amazing penthouse? And you say Airbnb. Or on Instagram, where it first launched and people were sharing Instagram pictures outside of Instagram, people would be like, whoa, how did you, make that cool photo? And of course, when the iPhone first came out, the iPhone was competing basically with BlackBerry. And so iPhone had a lot of exposure virality in email by appending the signature sent from my iPhone to, which was real exposure virality. And so all of these are great ways people can share your product. And so a couple of notes on exposure virality. And that is, firstly, it's not about value. As kind of a recipient of the Instagram picture, you don't get any like real value from that, right? What it is, it's mainly about social proof and often about status for the person who's sharing. And often for this to be effective, it needs to be really spectacular. So your product needs to be kind of like, at least visually or in some regard, like a game changer for people to care about it. So those are some notes on both network value and exposure virality. So you get a sense for how all those are really determined by the type of product you have. And I'll talk more about how these worked and didn't work for Mixmax in various contexts.
Perfect.
Sweet. Number 4 that we spoke about, invites and referrals. So this one probably all of you had a lot of familiarity with. And one of the really nice things about invites and referrals is no matter what your app is, you can be like an ERP finance app, really unsexy, and for invites and referrals can work for you too. So a couple of examples of that, right? Well, actually, before diving in there, just Jay, the kind of gist of this, right, is your customers get rewarded by you for sharing your product. There is some concrete incentive. And that incentive is outside of what the product does or how it functions. So in a lot of cases, this is actually kind of a consumery example. This was from Mailbox, the email client. From a while ago, they pioneered this notion of a wait list. So here, you would basically get bumped in line and get priority access to this hot app by sharing with other people. So the incentive there was, hey, you'll get access to this app earlier by sharing. Perhaps an example that's more relevant from the world of SaaS, if you know of Gusto, which is an HR platform, this is an example of their referral program. Here, if you invite friends and both of you run payroll, you'll both get $100. And so the beauty of this is you can almost always have a referral or invite mechanism, no matter what your app does. And you'll just have to think about crafting the right type of incentive that's really relevant to your target audience. And of course, this is one way with this type of reward and incentive that you can create virality. Sweet. Last type of virality, the coveted word of mouth or brand type of virality. So what is this? Well, this is just your product is so amazing that everyone just wants to talk about it. And so this could be for a variety of reasons. It could be that your app is really hot right now. Like if you remember that app Secret a while ago that then just like vanished. It's no guarantee of success. It just means your app is really cool for whatever reason and people love to talk about it. And so note here that there's actually, even if you don't have true word of mouth virality, even if your app isn't really cool, there's actually a secret trick. And that is the poor person's word of mouth, also known as content marketing. So even if your app isn't really hot, what you can do is you can write amazing content. And even if your customers, your CFOs in your ERP app don't want to talk to, their friends and family about ERP, you might still be writing amazing content that they share with everyone else. So even if they're not directly sharing your app, they're sharing kind of an artifact of your app and amazing content that you're making. So there's always a solution. Sweet. So those are the 5 different kinds of virality. We have network effects, value virality, exposure virality. Bear in mind those first 3 really depend on the type of product you have. And then referrals and invites and word of mouth, which you can almost always use. Awesome. With that, I thought I could share a little bit just our experience at Mixmax around what worked and what didn't, because we tried all of these types of virality. And as you'll see, some worked pretty well for us and a bunch totally bombed. So in my expectation here is as you go through and try to implement these in your product, you'll probably get similar results. And of course, the importance here is to try them out and see what works. Let's dive in. So first of all, network virality for us accounted for less than 1% of signups. So why did this totally bomb for us? Well, first of all, Mixmax works great on your own. You don't need a network for it to work. So we were like, hey, we'll try to hack it. And so we thought, in Mixmax, you can share all kinds of assets with folks in your team. It can be templates, images, sequences, rules, particular types of workflows. So we built this into the product where you can share sequences with people on your team. And so we said this is going to be awesome. People are going to be sharing this. And of course, it's kind of like a network effect because if you don't share, like your team can't benefit from it unless you're sharing it and unless they're on the product. So here's a screenshot of what it looked like when you shared sequences with folks. They'd get this email saying, hey, view this template in your dashboard, sign up for Mixmax, etc. And we thought, hey, we're really clever. We've created this new viral loop. Well, it turned out this totally bombed. And I think one of the reasons for this was just this type of kind of loop was just too far down the customer journey. If you're sharing assets with someone, you're already like a diehard and you're already using the product. So we didn't get that many incremental signups. And also just the fact that network effects kind of have to be intrinsic to your app for it to work. So that one didn't work very well for us. Another one that didn't work that well, exposure virality, 1 to 2% of signups. So this might be more surprising because you think in communication, you have a lot of ways you can show off your product. So the way we did this is we appended this signature, our own version of sent from iPhone. And so somehow appending the sent from Mixmax signature just doesn't have the same like panache that sent from iPhone did back in the day. And this was pretty surprising to us. And we actually did a number of analyses around this. And what we found was that the new user growth that was attributable to the signature, directly attributable, was actually roughly the same size as the number of people who just churned directly because they didn't want a default signature. And so that's in part why that contributed so little for us.
And so just to kind of stop you for a second, for that example where you have like shared by Mixmax, like how do you go about testing that, I guess, annoyance curve of like how many like powered by Mixmax kind of signs can we have before you start seeing people leave the product or not even using it at all on the free plan?
Yeah, great question. So in terms of measuring that churn, we actually split all signups in a 50-50 test where some of them got the signature and others didn't. And we saw a net drop in like day one activity from people that had the signature versus didn't. And so we calculated that impact over time versus the number of people who actually had clicked on the signature when they received it and then got in the app.
Okay. Super interesting.
That's how we split it out. Now, the interesting thing is in a lot of cases, we actually still have the signature. And part of the reason why we kept it was we were like, it has some good impact. Perhaps the number of clicks is, not equal to the number of impressions. So we still get to spread the bread a little bit. The signature does provide some social proof. And then lastly, just we felt, hey, folks that churn probably aren't our core audience anyhow if they're that sensitive about it. So deal with it. So
perfect.
That was how we thought about it. Sweet. And then the last couple of ones here. So referrals, 12% of signups for us. So in Mixmax, when you sign up, you're actually prompted to share Mixmax with people and you get free unlimited tracking. That's our incentive that you get this extra feature when you share. So we have this share dialogue. It's been pretty successful for us. And so the interesting thing here is that Mixmax overall, we don't actually measure, well, actually we started to. We measure NPS. However, we love to measure also whether people actually refer Mixmax or not, versus just saying, would you refer the product? And so this is kind of how we do it. And a couple of notes here on referrals that we kind of found as learnings. First of all, you want to do this early in the customer life cycle when people are really jazzed about the product. We got a lot of people saying, hey, don't do it early, etc. For us, it seems to have worked early. And it's like any HR person knows, when a new person joins your company, ask them for the Glassdoor referral day one, because everything's super rosy that day. And so that's what we do. Referrals also, I think, typically work if your product has pretty broad appeal. Mixmax can be used by kind of anyone in a customer-facing role, and you'll get value from it. So it's easier to share in that regard. And kind of a controversial last notion would be, what if you replaced NPS with actual referrals and started to measure what share of your user base is actually willing to refer your product versus just saying? So another way to think about how popular your app is. Sweet. Value virality. This one worked even better for us and continues to. So value virality in Mixmax works in the following way. This is one example of it, and this is a lighthouse experience in Mixmax. This is our calendaring integration. So in just a keystroke, kind of with the slash command, just like in Slack, you can type /meeting, will automatically insert times from your calendar inside of the message. When a recipient taps on the time, the meeting's automatically set up. This reduces so much back and forth if you think about the current flow for calendaring, which is, just sending emails back and forth asking when someone's available. And so this is value virality in a nutshell. You tap on a time, the meeting's automatically set up. And so it provides a lot of value even for people who aren't on Mixmax. And so this is kind of how we pioneered value virality in the company, and we've actually extended this to a lot of different areas in the product. These are some examples. We let you in the top left here embed, full PDF slideshows that work inside of an email, through to Q&A surveys, through to different types of polls, through to code snippets, through to live video that plays inside of email. All of these are ways in which Mixmax users can provide value to non-Mixmax users. And so that's one reason this has worked pretty well for us. Sweet. And then this last metric here that worked best, word of mouth, aka brand, 44% of signups. So the little humble brag of this video, of course, one thing that's awesome is if you can get people talking about your product, as we see here on Twitter, where people do. And I think the one learning for us here is, as Beyonce says, you want to be that person causing all that conversation. And so to cause conversation, you have to dare stick out a little bit. And so one way that we stuck out is we chose to actually provide this type of rich media inside of email directly. And so an example of this, right, is here basically two emails that are the same. One is before Mixmax on the left, and on the right, you have kind of with Mixmax. And so we take this LinkedIn link from being bland, boring, and unproductive into a gorgeous visual preview of this, candidate you want to present. So you see exactly what you're dealing with. And the interesting thing was when we launched this, we got a lot of complaints from people who were like, hey, this doesn't look professional, it looks like a marketing email, etc. And so we hesitated for a moment and said, hey, do we really want to do this? And ultimately we decided to, because we had enough people who really liked the experience. And we kind of decided it was good to do something that at least caused some conversation, knowing that a large part of our core kind of target base at least liked it, even though there were people that didn't. So we chose to favor conversation, even though perhaps it had some detrimental impact for us. So that's how we thought about helping spur word of mouth and brand. Sweet. So as a rundown, as you can see, overall, word of mouth, really big channel. There's a big component there from Chrome Store that I didn't mention here that just comes from the extension itself. People looking on the Chrome Store, and it has kind of its own set of mechanics, so not really worth mentioning in this context.
Okay, and so for word of mouth, how do you track that? Is that just organic search, or what does that entail?
Great question. So we actually, when we first did this, we actually didn't even have any ads or anything like that. The way we tracked this was a couple of different ways. First, from user surveys. And secondly, we looked at this from people who would actually just type Mixmax in Google, assuming that there was someone in their work pod that said, hey, check out this product. Oh, what's it called, etc. So that's how we measured that, knowing that it's a little bit can be tricky to measure.
Definitely.
So
okay, interesting.
And so last piece to wrap up here. Note, of course, with different types of virality, right? Not all of these channels are necessarily created equal, and you'll probably see different results on your own. So if you look at conversion rate to paid for these different channels, right? Word of mouth had perhaps unsurprisingly, or has unsurprisingly, the highest conversion rate to paid, followed by value, virality, and referrals and invites. And if you think about it, word of mouth makes sense because it's a warm endorsement by someone. People are more likely to convert. Exposure virality kind of comes in lowest. It's not perhaps very surprising either because it's a lower type and more passive type of endorsement. And of course, with value virality, you've kind of experienced some value, so perhaps you're more likely to convert given that. And of course, as you all know, this comes as no surprise. It's just helpful to think that virality actually comes in many different shapes and flavors, and so they will all have their different impact on your bottom line as well. So with that, hope you got to learn about the 5 different types of virality, how they all worked out differently for us. Hope you got some inspiration for how you could use them in your companies. And thanks so much. If you want to connect, you can find me on Twitter at Olofster and Mixmax on @Mixmax. Thanks so much, Wes.
Perfect. Thank you, Olof, for going through everything. This has been incredible. I love some of the things you had to say about the value virality and exposure virality of just how can you create that product that grows on its own. And a lot of those things, I'm sure for a lot of the audience, are just not something you typically think about. And how can you really make sure that your product makes people look great and just make sure that they actually do want to share it whenever they see Powered by Mixmax or anything else, because you're making them look good. So that is brilliant. And so
Thanks.
just for everyone else who's listening here, like what is the best way to get in contact with you?
I think it would actually be on Twitter, so any of the handles we see there, or feel free to write to me directly, Olof, Olof, @mixmax.com too.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Have a great day.
Thanks so much, Wes. Cheers.
Bye.